Reporting from Australia on our Treasurer Dr Jim Chalmers' fifth federal budget on the 12th of May 2026, heralding it the most important and ambitious budget in decades. While much has happened since last year's budget, the bugbears are still the same. The cost of living pressures, inflation and global uncertainty. The key difference is that last year's budget was just before the election, hence why the government can be more ambitious now. The ambition for property tax reform targeted at getting younger generations on the property ladder. The measures will only allow negative gearing on new homes and reduce the capital gains tax discounts for established homes. You'll be pleased to know there were no changes to the super rules, so we've focused our coverage around the tax announcements. There are also some tax sweeteners, a new $250 permanent offset for workers and $1,000 instant deduction. Welcome back to the ALX Report. I'm Alex Lowen reporting for the Alex Lowen Exchange with trusted colleagues Nick Yates, Investment Manager at Road Knight Investments Australia, and James Clyne, CEO of the Dylan Clyne Advisory Group, otherwise known for previous media work as Jimmy the Finance Guy. And of course, Rod North, my co-host for Bourse TV and the Investment Clock expert. Welcome, guys.
Thank you very much, Alex. It's a pleasure.
Thanks for having us, Alex.
Thank you for being here. Nick, would you like to kick off with what you think of this budget announcement?
Well, look, Alex, it's certainly ambitious. I think what we're seeing is the fundamental Europeanisation of the Australian economy. So what I mean by that is looking to a larger social state, a more redistributive model, higher tax, higher spend per unit of GDP, and really moving towards that growth agenda might not be the best way of describing the European economy over the last 20 years, but certainly looking towards that model of economics as opposed to something more in the US, high sort of sink or swim, low redistributive state. That would be the fundamentals of what this budget means.
Well said. What do you think, James?
Well, I think it's a fundamental shift and the biggest tax regime change since the 2001 GST introduction. So it's been talked about for a long time. Moving into private wealth and the private assets of passive income, and here it is.
Well said too. Rod.
And I guess we've now got a treasurer who's probably the highest tax treasurer we've had in Australia's history, and I think the effects of this are going to obviously play out, in a way that perhaps is going to be interesting, particularly with the people that make things happen in Australia, businesses and people who aspire to create wealth. Are probably going to feel a bit of the pinch here as we'll see a fair bit of redistribution happening. It also perhaps highlights that a lot of the younger people might get a better chance into the property market, but the only thing against that perhaps is the very high migration still coming into the country, because we're probably going to see another increase in our population by about 3 million over the next few years. So that'll be interesting to see how that'll play out, because we've got to build more homes as well and make it a lot easier for the younger generation to get into property. I think that's one of the keys.
Absolutely. And on that, James, can you please share what at Dylan Clyne you're sharing with your clients?
Yeah, fundamentally there's three mechanisms of which this economy on this tax regime is changing. The first one is about negative gearing. If you remember, negative gearing is the ability to offset the losses on an investment, whether it be property or shares, to offset against other income like wages or other passive income. Negative gearing, as of last night, is effectively finished. The good news, existing assets will remain a negative gearing asset, and that will be grandfathered for as long until that asset is sold. But any new assets, as of 7:30 last night, the negative gearing tax deduction is no longer available, which is the fundamental shift in investment, especially around property here in Australia. That's number one. Number two revolves around the capital gains, that assets in the previous regime that were held for more than 12 months enjoyed a 50% discount on the profit, meaning when you made a profit on the sale of a passive asset, you would only pay tax on 50% of it. That's going. We do have some time as of July 2027, which is next year. Any profits made after that will be taxed at the flat rate will be made at 30%, meaning that if you make a gain on a passive asset, there'll be a tax rate of 30%. Now, there is mechanisms around the cost base and inflationary mechanisms to ensure that we're paying what they're calling the real profit of a sale. What's a real profit? We can argue that for a couple of hours. But fundamentally, assets up until 30 June next year will enjoy a 50% discount, and then assets after that will be under this new regime. Okay?
And Nick, for being a younger generation, tell us what you're saying and what your friends are talking about.
Well, I think there's a couple of layers to take to this from a younger generation's point of view. Rod, to pick up on your point on housing affordability, just using the budget's own estimates, they're referencing 75,000 homes built over 10 years or 7,500 per year. What maybe is not quite widely understood, there's 11.45 million is the total housing stock. So that means that the budget is forecasting to build not even 8 homes in every 10,000 existing around Australia. So when we actually contextualise that number of build out from the federal government, it is somewhere between less than a drop in the ocean and even less than that when we consider it's not even 8 homes in 10,000 existing dwellings here in the country. The second thing on that affordability metric is, as by the own budget papers say, they're looking at knocking about $19,000 off the median house price. So the median house price is in the order of $900,000 around Australia, up or down. If we look at a 20% housing deposit, which is what we're expected to save generally speaking as a kind of rule of thumb, this will knock $3,800 off that deposit, or to give a better way of thinking it, take it from $188,000 to $184,000. Do I think young people are particularly advantaged by dropping the total house deposit required from 188 to 184? No, I don't think it really moves the dial on my generation much whatsoever. What we are doing, however, is taking away the tax benefits that my parents received in their wealth creating phase and then taking them away from me at the altar of this $4,000 shift in the cost of a deposit. So that probably gives you a sense of what I think, Alex.
Oh, thank you so much. Make it real, in real terms, like you always do, Rod. Tell us more.
Well, I think it's really interesting to get some comments from the panel, particularly in relation to shares, because obviously a lot of young people have invested in shares over the last 4 or 5 years or even a bit longer, because we've been in one of the longest bull markets we've seen in many decades, because that really started back in 2009. And I think obviously the tax changes there in terms of, those sort of investments are going to be interesting just to see how that'll pan out, because I think a lot of young people thought they might create some wealth there that will then enable them to leverage into property. So, be interested in what you guys think about that.
It's a really good point. The share trading is more volatile and more prevalent, say, than a passive asset like a property, meaning that the capital gains rules are really going to come into play. So especially in the 2028 financial year, in 18 months' time, we are effectively paying 6% more tax on any significant gain. And let me explain what that is. So the 30% minimum threshold that they've earmarked for these sort of characteristics, we used to enjoy at a maximum 24% tax rate when we had a capital gain above a certain rate. So 48% is our top marginal rate, half that, the 50% discount, 24% effective tax rate. They're actually clipping now 6%. Now, does 6% move the needle? Well, yeah, I think it might, especially to your point, if they're trading their way to a deposit, trading their way to their first investment.
Which we were told to do, no less. Yes. Remember, we were incentivised and encouraged to find a way to save.
That's right. And so, I think you're right. I'm not as bullish about you about this generational gap between the original investors and then the next generation. But it is certainly an adjustment here, and maybe this is just the start of it. So over the next 5 or 6 years, they actually might pull that generation mechanism even harder. We'll see.
And is this a government that wants to get people to put more money, particularly young people, into superannuation as well? Because obviously those changes have occurred, and this budget's not making any further changes there because you've got that 3 million threshold.
Well, the 12% mandatory rate at the moment, there's no talk of that moving that any further. When superannuation first came in the mid-'80s, I always wanted to get to 15%. That's a bit of a stretch in the current economy. But also the compliance around superannuation, where the information to employees around the nation about whether their super is being paid or not. And on the 1st of July for all businesses, we have same-day super requirements, meaning when you make payroll, you are to make the super payment as well, not of this quarter behind thing. So superannuation is going to become more prevalent in as part of an investment strategy. And I believe it's a policy to diversify people away from property. So their wealth creation sits within property, sits within superannuation, and then with active trading and any other sort of business activity.
Thank you for watching, and for those viewers who are not advisors, please make sure you speak to your advisor before making any investment decisions based on this video. We are very much so going to get these leaders back. These leaders from Melbourne, Australia, Rod North, James Clyne and Nick Yates. Do send in your questions to news@thealxreport.com and we'll be with you shortly, and make sure you get the latest news on global and local markets. We've got you back, and make sure to keep positive.